So, I've been playing a game called Genshin Impact for quite a while, drowning myself in the countless lore videos, trying to piece together the complexity that is the lore in this game. And although there is quite a bit presented in the in-game cutscenes, most of the really interesting stuff seems to be layered and layered and layered underneath floors and floors and floors of context, and loosely based connections in real-world myths. I know all of you typically come here for Epic 7 lore, but I've decided that I want to do content for another gacha game that I've been spending a lot of time in as well. Being a writer by hobby myself, having played the game casually since its launch, I want to be able to contribute a fresh new perspective on the heaps of lore content that have been piling up and overflowing online as more areas of the game are released. So, this is my attempt to do just that, and I would be eternally grateful if you would join me. I am going to attempt to stay relatively away from the big, spooky lore, like how recently I've been reading that Yae Miko might actually be the real Electro Archon, and that Bal is just a front, which I won't lie is scaring my diminishing stock of Dolphin to Primogems a little bit, or anything regarding the events of the war with Conria that transpired 500 years ago. No. I want to focus on what I'm going to uncreatively call the Little Things of Teyvat. You know, the things that are so obscure that when playing this game, any average player just trying to enjoy an open-world pseudo-MMORPG would not even bat an eye at. I believe that these little things will not only enhance our experience of this game, but could also have dire consequences when we pair them with the overall narrative of the lore, and further enhance those larger plot points. So, allow me to humbly step back from the sheer myriad of big spooky lore content, and let us, rather than broaden our vision, focus it down on the little things. If you enjoy this kind of content, subscribe to the channel if you want to see more. Leave a like and a comment in the video if you want to support me or just want to help me build a community. Today, I want to focus in on a topic that seems to resurface over and over again, as more content is released. As the title states, let's talk about the changing role of the Traveler. While endlessly browsing through Reddit and MiHoYo's forums alike, I've read through many rabbit holes of people constantly talking about the Traveler and about their role in the story. The conversation usually concludes with, well, this is just how MiHoYo has written the character, and so there's really nothing we can do about it. With each new area that is released, with new dialogues and story, this topic always seems to rear its ugly head. And recently, with the release of Inazuma in version 2.0, we've started to see an even larger than normal divergence between who the Traveler is meant to represent and who MiHoYo is steering them to become. So, come follow me down a path of thinking that should explain why people are finding the Traveler's behavior so strange as of late, as well as a wild theory I have that could explain all of these issues in a mind-bending way. Now, just to veer slightly off the road onto a beaten path for a disclaimer, I am going to be using the canonized version of the Traveler, which is the male version named Ether, for the remainder of this video, as I do think that MiHoYo is writing the story mainly with this canonized version in mind, and because it's much easier for me in terms of writing this script. Also, there is evidence, as amusing as it is, of pieces of dialogue where Paimon and other characters are actually misgendering Ether, which I suppose in this day and age could be something to look deeper into, but my personal opinion is that there's a bug in the code when selecting which dialogue for which gender to use. But if any of you want to fall even deeper into that rabbit hole, by all means knock yourselves out. Let me show you at least one of these such times when, during my playthrough of the game playing as Ether, Paimon labeled me as a she or a her.
You tone-deaf bard! Don't you see how crazy this is? You've seen what Devon is like when he's ticked off. She'll be swallowed whole before she even gets to lift a finger.
Alright, Paimon, let's get back onto the main road. As I was saying, there's been a sizable departure of the role that Aether is meant to play, and being a writer in my spare time, I've noticed a general shift in how Aether has been presented as the narrative of Genshin Impact has taken shape. At the beginning of our journey, the Traveler is represented by two individuals, Aether and Lumine, brother and sister fleeing from some unknown entity. That entity is immediately revealed to us by form, and proceeds to attack the siblings. We, the players, are given the opportunity to not only select which sibling we will play as for the remainder of the game, but we can also change their names, which is an issue I'm going to get into. Also, on an aside, and this is probably going to be a regular thing, these asides, I do think that MiHoYo is not going to provide us with a toggle to switch the Travelers due to the narrative inconsistencies, considering how MiHoYo seems to care a lot about a consistent story, but I'll get into that a little later. Anyways, usually in games, when we are able to change a character's gender and their name alongside a whole host of customizable options, these characters are meant to serve a very specific purpose. They are meant to act as what is narratively called a surrogate. In this case, out of the two siblings, one of them will become our player surrogate, as a reference to us playing a game. This kind of character type can be found in books, movies, or any other medium that has a narrative. You may have noticed that when Aether finally awakens on Teyvat, he mentions that he has amnesia, which again is a very common trope used in order to create player surrogates. But Keeper, what is the role that these player surrogates are taking? Well, dear Traveler, for those that are interested in these narrative devices, put simply, player surrogates act in the world in place of a player. As players of a game, we don't know much about the world of Teyvat, and so why not have the main character, or some other character that we meet early on, ask all of the questions that we, the players, would normally ask in order to learn more about the world, and more organically supplant what is called exposition, or in layman's terms, explaining stuff without having a reason to explain it. This is why amnesia is such a powerful tactic, because it easily provides a blanket reason for all forms of exposition. It does not make sense for a character who lives in the world to not know basic things about the world. For example, of this in Teyvat could be if our main character was Jean, the acting Grandmaster of the Knights of Favonius. Having to ask who the Knights of Favonius are, simply because the player is not familiar with the Knights yet. If a character has conveniently lost their memory, it logically makes sense for them to ask basic questions, while at the same time provides this information to the player without causing any logical inconsistencies within the world itself. In other words, this preserves the character's integrity and believability in the story, while still providing the audience with the information they need to understand the world itself. Nothing is worse than a character acting like they know what's already going to happen, or act under information that they could not possibly have known, simply to move the plot forward. At the same time, nothing is equally worse than a character who asks questions regarding information that the audience assumes that they should already know. Yeah, I'm talking to you, Game of Thrones TV series. This is why games like Dark Souls work so well with this formula. In that game, we awake in a world where all the important events have already happened, and we've just come to the scene to figure out the overall ending of those past events. In Genshin Impact, the sibling we choose to play as awakens in a world where there is a lot of history that has already been played out, but the plot is still transpiring. Back in Dark Souls, our character has no history, or at least no history that impacts our gameplay and our story. No matter where we come from, we are strangers in a land ripe with discovery. Hence why in Dark Souls, our character literally has no dialogue. This is why it is so strange to me why we can change our character's name, because like I said earlier, as we reach Inazuma in 2.0, Aether seems to be starting to reclaim his identity. In fact, Aether is already breaking out of the mold of surrogate character, since he and his sister were reunited in Dainsleif's side story, We Will Be Reunited. The choices in the dialogue options are generally becoming less and less diverging, to where it really doesn't matter which option we choose. Aether is responding relatively similarly in all of the options, so what's the point of having options at all? Why are there instances where there's only one option to choose from? It can't possibly be to save money from Aether's voice actor not contributing lines, because Aether speaks completely normal if you access his voice lines from the character menu. So MiHoYo, what's up with that? In Dark Souls, we can customize our character's name, history, face, body, absolutely everything about them, because the character has no relevance to the world, just like how we players don't have relevancy in Teyvat. We are simply exploring it and piecing together the story, while at the same time seeing how these past events are influencing the future plot going forward. However, Aether and Lumine do appear to have relevancy in the world. They have a connection to the world of Teyvat, history with its past, which is what makes Aether's interactions or lack of interactions so jarring. There are so many instances where I'm left wondering why he isn't more responsive to certain events in the game that should be relevant to him, and the only answer I'm left with is that he just doesn't remember anything. Why can he use elemental power without a vision or delusion? He doesn't know. He can't remember. Why hasn't he questioned this? Many people have been asking since the beta of this game why Aether never speaks, or only has a handful of speaking lines, most of which are grunts and calling out someone's name in a tense situation. Why does Paimon speak for us at every turn? The ironic part about this line of inquiry is that Aether actually speaks quite a bit in this game. We just never hear him because his dialogue is chained to the options that we are given to select, which amount to very terse, quick responses like he's texting one-phrase answers to everything. Nothing he says has much detail to it, which forces MiHoYo to use another character to provide it, aka our dialogue hog Paimon. And let's be real, we would all love to hear Aether and Lumine's voice actors way more than Paimon's. It's not that her voice is bad, but when it's literally 75% of the dialogue, it can get quite grating on the ears. Again, this can make his character very jarring to experience, because even though other characters in Teyvat are technically hearing Aether speak, we as players don't. We just select an option and the other characters respond immediately, which would be okay if this character was meant to be us, but he's not. He has information that we don't about his sister Lumine, and about their exploits before we encounter them in the opening cinematic. But Keeper, you said earlier that he experienced amnesia, right? Yes, I did, and at the very beginning of the story, this strange behavior is an acceptable development. Even though Aether has experienced amnesia, he is slowly regaining these memories. Now, MiHoYo has been pretty good at giving us a glimpse of these memories, but Aether ultimately has the context that we don't on how to interpret these memories. There is no further dialogue to explain them. We just witness images. It would be nice to have Aether voiced over these memories, recalling the context for us as he should be if we're supposed to be him. Again, I stress that fact that this is not necessarily a bad thing, as there are plenty of games out there that have a main character that have their own stories and histories and can still act as player surrogates. The only difference is those characters have their own identities. We can't change their names. But in Genshin Impact, we are given the unique opportunity to rename Aether and Lumine, therefore stripping them of their identities, and yet their identities are starting to bleed through. It's almost as if, and this could be major speculation, maybe even a cool theory, if done correctly, but when Aether and Lumine are attacked by the assumed sustainer of heavenly principles at the beginning of the game, when they awaken with no memories, they are technically blank slates, even though we rename them during the opening cutscene itself, and not afterwards. And as they travel through their journey on Teyvat, they will eventually reconcile and return to being Aether and Lumine by the end of it, relinquishing the name that we players gave them when their memories were locked away. And yes, I know, that's just a preposterous theory that no one should be putting weight on. But if this was actually MiHoYo's plan, let's be real here, I would be incredibly impressed, because the sheer magnitude of fourth wall breaking potential for this would be off the charts in my opinion. Anyhow, I digress. miHoYo is ultimately trying to bake their cake and eat it too. They want main characters that we, the players, are acting in place of and feel more connected to, but also have main characters that come with them an entire history to unravel and explore. This is the chief reason for why players have felt incredibly uneasy about Aether's role in general. Maybe I'm wrong, and this is completely intentional from miHoYo about my theory that this is some fourth wall breaking tactic, but at this point in time, miHoYo has not shown any desire to go in this direction. Inazuma has blown this issue wide open again, as Aether seems to be in a very specific state of mind as he explores Inazuma's shores, and he seems to have very pointed opinions about the situation that he is in as a traveler from another world being scrutinized upon, and seems to be continually affected by the events of Dainsleif's side story when he was reunited with his sister. This tells me that Aether knows something about the memories that he has reclaimed that we, the players, do not. But because the game demands that we have no voice in this game, or that he has no voice in this game, he cannot communicate the context to us. We are left to instead wonder by ourselves. As Aether made his way into Mondstadt, he was welcomed with the freedom to pretty much do whatever he wanted, to do odd jobs for people he enjoyed being around. In Liyue, he is pretty much forced into helping people in order to unravel the mysteries surrounding the Geo Archon's whereabouts and the Fatui. He still makes a decision to help though. Now, in Inazuma, he is literally a wanted criminal who is being hunted down by the Electro Archon herself and must band together with a ragtag resistance. And he's definitely showing how annoyed he is at the current events. He's not without his own personality and identity in these cutscenes, and I suspect that this disparity will only get wider from here. It's just strange to me that Aether's voice actor gets more lines in the patch previews than in his own game, or even if you choose to play Lumine and vice versa. One game that did this beautifully, and would also have a solution to miHoYo regarding this jarring nature of the main protagonist, is Mass Effect. Shepard is a player-created character that simply recites the dialogue that you choose from selecting the dialogue option. Simply having Aether or Lumine's voices speak to other characters will eliminate this strange uneasiness altogether, and also make Paimon a much more enjoyable companion instead of the dialogue hog that most of the community deems her to be. The fact is that Aether or Lumine have dialogue in this game, but because we never get to hear them speaking, we never get a sense of who they are as characters. We never hear the excitement or anguish or resentment or fear in their voices during the scenes in which they happen. The last big hurdle is the fact that many players have already named their travelers different names, which I've already outlined in a way of getting around that through a fourth wall breaking plot point. But this is most likely not going to happen, and also why we probably won't be getting a toggle for our male or female travelers as much as we would like, unless they allowed us to create another name for the other gender. It just gets way too confusing and creates more problems than it solves, in my humble opinion. And that marks the end of my first foray into Genshin Impact lore. I really hope you enjoyed this rather odd angle of going into Genshin's lore from a narrative perspective, and I have many other little things in Teyvat to explore. So if you enjoyed this, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the little bell to be notified when I release my next video. Also, let me know in the comments if you would be interested in me doing a narrative retelling of the entire story act by act. I've seen a few voices mention wanting content like this, so I would like to sort of get a sense of where that idea would land in the community. And with that, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Keeper out.